Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Hurricane Laura blasted through Louisiana, killing at least 4 people and causing structural damage. It's now headed north. Republicans at the RNC denounced the violence during recent riots. They took a stand in support of law enforcement and peaceful protesting. This as National Guard members from around the country make their way to Kenosha, Wisconsin. California Supreme Court requires Governor Newsom to respond to a petition that pushes back against his order that's keeping most of the state's schools closed. Parents and school board members gathered to voice their opposition to the governor's decision. New discussion over safety in nursing homes. Some assisted living residents may have contracted the virus from infected caregivers, but the need for staff to stay at home has created even more problems. And the Chinese regime plans to launch an ambitious policy for vaccine diplomacy. So far, it's already promised vaccine priority to nearly half the world's population. The National Guard is now working to clean up a Louisiana city after Hurricane Laura blasted through, killing at least 4 residents. The governor's chief of staff expects that there could be more deaths, and forecasters warn winds could pick up to a point where they rip apart buildings, level trees, and toss vehicles like toys.
The Category 4 hurricane made landfall in Cameron, Louisiana, near the Texas border. Tropical storm force winds stretch more than 100 miles from the center. President Trump is planning to visit the Gulf Coast over the weekend to tour the damage.
Tonight, in fact, I was actually prepared to postpone the speech tonight and make it on Monday. I was going to Texas. I was going to Louisiana, maybe Arkansas. Looks like Arkansas. I just spoke to the governor. It's going to be in pretty good shape, but they'll need some help.
Where do you think that come from?
This is some of the destruction that followed the storm's landfall. Sustained winds of 150 miles per hour and gusts of almost 130 miles per hour were reported near Cameron, Louisiana, as the storm's eye approached.
We're going to need to quickly transition them into hotel and motel rooms, which have been filled up with people who've evacuated on their own.
The National Guard now working to clean up. Last reported by the Hurricane Center, Laura is moving at 15 miles per hour toward the north. The National Hurricane Center predicts that the tropical storm will continue to spread across parts of Louisiana and Arkansas. Tornadoes might form tonight. And through Friday, Laura is expected to produce 4 to 8 inches of rainfall in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas.
Speakers on night 3 of the RNC condemned the violent riots in U.S. cities. Vice President Mike Pence made it clear the Republican Party wants to ensure there is law and order in the U.S. He said they also support the right to peacefully protest. And other speakers affirmed they will continue to honor heroes in law enforcement. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Republicans at their convention denounced the riots that have brought terror to U.S. cities over the last several months. Pence praised the heroes of law enforcement that serve the U.S. every day and mourned for the DHS officer that was killed in May during riots in Oakland, a city where protests and riots exploded after the police shooting of Jacob Blake.
The violence must stop, whether in Minneapolis, Portland, or Kenosha. Too many heroes have died defending our freedom to see Americans strike each other down. We will have law and order on the streets of this country for every American of every race and creed and color.
According to Pence, he and President Trump will always support the rights of Americans to protest peacefully.
But rioting and looting is not peaceful protest. Tearing down statues is not free speech. And those who do so will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Protesters faced off with police in Minneapolis on Wednesday when riots and looting gripped the downtown area. Police said the rioting happened after a crowd mistook a man's suicide for a fatal police shooting. The rioting persisted even after police released video of the suicide to prominent members of the community. South Dakota's governor warned that we could lose our nation quickly if we continue down the path of radicals.
From Seattle and Portland to Washington and New York, Democrat-run cities across this country are being overrun by violent mobs. The violence is rampant. There's looting, chaos, destruction, and murder.
The situation in Kenosha calmed on Thursday for the first night after multiple nights of looting and 2 deaths after the police-involved shooting of Jacob Blake. Officials announced National Guard from Arizona, Alabama, and Michigan will be sent to Kenosha. Senator Blackburn from Tennessee said President Trump stands by our law enforcement and military while the left tries to vilify them.
I'm talking about the heroes of our law enforcement and armed services. Leftists try to turn them into villains. They want to cancel them. But I'm here to tell you, these heroes can't be canceled.
President Trump will speak on Thursday night at the RNC, where he will likely accept his nomination from the South Lawn of the White House with an expected 1,500 people in attendance. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
President Trump addressed the violence that has been going on in Portland for the last 90 days. He said he could put an end to it in 1 hour using the National Guard. He said all the governor and mayor have to do is ask for the assistance and it will be there. And for the last 4 years, former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page has been at the center of now disproven allegations of Trump-Russia collusion during the 2016 election. Page's ordeal started when the FBI obtained warrants to spy on him. It's now proven that the applications for those warrants were riddled with serious errors, including one email that was deliberately edited to say Page wasn't a source for the CIA when the original email confirmed that he was. The FBI lawyer who made the change recently pled guilty. Page has written a tell-all book, which he hopes will set the record straight. It's called Abuse and Power: How an Innocent American Was Framed in an Attempted Coup Against the President. American Thought Leaders host Jan Jekielek spoke to Page about all of this. Here's an excerpt from that interview.
But, you know, there's still a lot more that needs to be uncovered. And again, having been on the inside of this terrible scandal, and, you know, I wanted to tell all the truth as to what actually happened, you know, in contrast to the terrible bad acts that were done by people both within government and out of government to perpetrate this fraud on the American people. And to your point, it very much interrelates with the media element as well, because, you know, there's this cozy attitude or cozy culture in Washington where the media works very closely or has these, you know, intimate relationships, in some cases, you know, literally an intimate relationship between the media and intelligence operatives and government operatives. And it really leads to in many cases, people just advancing their own political interests and their own political objectives. And in doing so, creating terrible damage for our country. So just something I really wanted to highlight and, you know, start exposing just what the terrible ramifications are and what the some steps that can be taken to fix this horrendous problem.
And you can watch the full interview on American Thought Leaders tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and again tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. And California parents and students are waiting to hear Governor Newsom's response to the lawsuit they filed that urges him to revise his school reopening plan. The state's Supreme Court quickly took up the case and says the governor has till tomorrow to respond. Our team has more from Orange County, California.
California parents, students, and school board members gathered to speak out against Governor Newsom's school reopening plan after the Orange County Board of Education filed a lawsuit challenging Newsom's plan that restricts the majority of California schools to online learning.
And it's really difficult because both myself and her dad, we both work full-time. So how are we supposed to educate our children when we're working full-time?
She also points out that the kids miss their friends and the morale is low because they don't feel like they're a part of the community anymore.
And I couldn't even, hug her or anything. And it's been so long since I've seen her.
You miss your friends?
Because we don't get to see our friends and play with anyone. And that's really sad because we missed our friends for a really long time.
The school board's lawsuit claims Governor Newsom violates the 14th Amendment, which says that any state shall not deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
The American freedoms that we have are literally being trampled right now. It's a travesty, and it's important for like other people that have showed up here today that we stand up and that we don't allow that. That's the beautiful thing about America, is that we have that freedom to stand up.
The attorney representing the case predicts that the governor won't be able to defend his plan because it's not backed with science.
About 54 children who died from influenza in the United States since the beginning of COVID-19, but I think it was only 23 who died from COVID-19. So the reality of it is, for children, COVID-19 is less deadly than the flu, the common flu.
One school board member and plaintiff for the case is also a physician at a children's hospital, and he's treated COVID patients over the past few months.
And so I know what it's like. These kids just don't get sick. They don't die. The problem is there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of fear-mongering that's going on out there, and it's scaring people to think, oh, we have all these COVID cases. Well, those patients who have COVID, they usually do quite well and recover in a few days.
Governor Newsom is required by the state's highest court to respond to the petition by Friday afternoon. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Nursing homes have seen some of the worst mortality rates anywhere from the virus. One of the possible causes is the admission of virus-positive patients, a practice currently being probed by the DOJ. But one expert says it's not just the patients that have put nursing home residents at risk. NTD's Dawn Tran has the details.
The number of reported deaths in nursing homes and assisted living facilities have made up nearly half of all CCP virus deaths in the U.S. Some are saying it's because several states allowed for infected people to be admitted to nursing homes. Brenda Avadian, founder of the Caregiver's Voice, said employees who might have the virus but go to work anyway have also endangered the elderly.
They will come to work regardless, even if they have a slight sniffle, and it could be the onset of COVID, they'll still come to work because they need to earn wages to support their families.
And if symptomatic workers do stay at home, a new problem emerges where some of the residents will be cared for while others will not.
So it's a double-edged sword, really. Imagine your own grandmama living in a nursing home today with limited staff, and she's disoriented. How would she cope? How would you as a family cope when you can't even visit? Some of the homes still have restrictions.
Caretakers earn about $15 an hour. According to Brenda, the low income combined with excessive work has caused for very poor conditions in nursing homes. She believes that increasing pay and providing other initiatives will improve work experience as well as the residents' standard of living.
These are the things we can do with limited staff during the coronavirus until we finally see an end to this, have some kind of vaccine or just something where fewer people are being diagnosed and dying from this.
Brenda also suggested that the government reduce oversight and paperwork so that caregivers have more time to look after residents.
Up next, a community in a small Californian village comes together to offer support after the wildfires wreaked havoc on their lives. And more firefighters are being called in to help California. We spoke with some of them who call keeping people safe their first priority. Find out more when we return. In a small village in California, people went through a lot when wildfires threatened to burn their homes and everything inside. But as our correspondent Eileen Ang discovered, people there are working together to get through it.
As in many places around California, residents in Carmel Valley Village have to leave everything behind when their evacuation order came through. Our California correspondent Eileen Eng drove out there to hear from residents about how they're pulling through. They say they help each other wherever they can, like the reentry pods set up around town. They're there to help during natural disasters or traumatic events.
So they can pick up different things. We have different kits. We make sure they have masks and they have gloves. And they have what we call comfort kits, and also some hand sanitizer and some water.
Many fled with just the clothes on their back and barely a backward glance. Now, about 50 people take turns making hot meals for evacuees and firefighters.
And they don't really get hot food, so we took some hot food out to them.
Alondra's turn came just before she too was evacuated. We asked who would prepare tonight's dinner. She referred us to a small supermarket in the village.
Just got the call this morning from Alondra, so I don't even know for which crew it is. But I guess they needed something for 58 people crew.
He added that he is happy he can return home because that's not the case for everybody. About 50 houses in the village burned down.
Firefighters from several states are pitching in to help California. We spoke with some of them to find out more about their jobs and what they say those in fire-prone regions should do to protect themselves.
California's fires are still threatening homes and lives despite containment efforts. Our reporter spoke with some of those doing their best to calm the blazes. Captain Tony McHale from the Cal Fire Management Team said many factors go into fighting a fire, but the #1 priority is to keep people safe.
The challenges for firefighters is finding those locations, accessing the fires, finding those locations where you can make a stand and defend, and at the same time maintaining the safety of your crew. And then, of course, the residents that are in the area, that's the #1 priority.
According to him, living in rural areas does pose inherent risks. In summer, people are exposed to the threat of wildfires, while in the winter, floodings and mudslides endanger people's homes. McHale said that locals should be prepared in the event of a wildfire.
Have a plan. In other words, know what happens if a wildland fire goes, have things ready, know what you're going to take with you, know where you're going to meet as a family, important documents, your pets, if you have animals, what you're going to do with them.
Another firefighter who operates a bulldozer to create containment lines says he was called in from elsewhere to support the firefighting effort. He's been there for 10 days already, but adds the team is making progress on the fire complex they're working on.
43% contained.
Oh, okay.
So it's a big jump in the last 2 days. Because the weather's been so good to us.
So far, the two biggest fire complexes, SCU and LNU, both stand around 30% containment.
The rash of recent wildfires across California has sparked new concern about the health dangers of breathing in air from wildfires. And it's a real threat to pets, too. Now, there's a way you can protect your dog from the short and long-term effects of toxic smoke from wildfires. A company out of Texas has come up with the first air filter mask made just for dogs. It's aptly called the Canine Mask. It has 4 layers of air filtration, and it's designed specifically for the shape of a dog's muzzle. You can buy it on the Canine Mask website and on Amazon. And coming up, the capital city of China's Xinjiang region already on lockdown for more than a month. Now a resident tells us the extent of the measures. Even opening the front door is a crime. And following closely behind China's controversial mask diplomacy comes a new strategy, vaccine diplomacy. Find out how much of the world's population it could affect when we return. Now we turn to China's northwest Xinjiang region. Its capital already on lockdown for 40 days. Now a local resident tells us the extent of the local virus measures. Opening the front door is now considered a criminal act. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
The capital city of China's Xinjiang region has remained under lockdown for 40 days. In some neighborhoods inside the city called Urumqi, residents' doors have even been blocked off and sealed shut with iron nails. Local resident Ms. Wang described the situation to us. We gave her a pseudonym to protect her identity. She explained that simply opening the front door is now considered a crime, adding that people dare not protest.
Just 2 days ago, someone opened their door and then was taken away. The common people are timid and fearful. Who wants to take the lead to protest? Nobody. People are all submissive.
She told us that citizens there are scared because the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's, means of preserving its control have always been strict.
People maintaining so-called safety here in Xinjiang, people were sent to detention centers or training centers for 2 or 3 years. Then they were being sentenced, but even after the sentence ended, they won't let them go.
Wang also described the hardships people there are facing after nearly half a year without work.
Suddenly, all of us were out of work. The financial burden has been really heavy. There are many people who cannot bear the pressure. Some had to spend all their savings to cover their costs. Many people count on their wages and don't have much savings. The epidemic has been churning for over half a year. Since then, I haven't been back to work.
She noted that the prices of common goods and foods have also skyrocketed.
It used to cost about $4 to buy a chicken. Now it's about $9. Before the epidemic, before the city's lockdown, watermelons in Xinjiang had dropped to about 10 cents per 2-pound melon. But since the city's closure began, it has now risen to about 50 cents.
That's as the Chinese regime managed to earn money as a result of the lockdown.
At that time, watermelons were still in the fields. Farmers couldn't sell them. They were going to rot in the fields. The authorities sent cars to farmers to collect the melons for free. Who got all the money? Who does the supermarket even serve?
State-run enterprises are also taking advantage of the situation, while private companies continue to suffer.
Only China's postal service does not stop. What do you call this? It's not fair that China Post can have a monopoly just because it's a state enterprise.
Though amid the turmoil, Wang said not everyone is suffering. According to her, Communist Party officials and cadres aren't enduring the same difficulties as people in the lower classes.
Many large supermarkets are still open, but common people can't go. Only those from community management and the leading cadres can. The supermarkets remain open for them. They are living a normal life.
Now we look to China's virus measures on a broader national scale. On the heels of its controversial mask diplomacy, the CCP is starting to launch an ambitious policy for vaccine diplomacy. The Chinese regime's promises to prioritize vaccine supplies for certain countries now cover nearly half of the world's population. According to Wall Street Journal, China and Pakistan will collaborate on conducting clinical trials of China's vaccine. Later, Pakistan will receive enough doses during early distribution to vaccinate about 1/5 of its population. Other similar promises have been made to Afghanistan and some African countries. China's Premier Li Keqiang also promised priority to 5 countries alongside the Mekong River, including Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Vaccine distribution also involves the South China Sea dispute. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte promised China that U.S. Army members will not return to bases in the country in exchange for vaccine supplies. So far, Beijing has agreed to think about prioritizing the needs of the Philippines. That's as many other countries are involved in China's Phase 3 human trials. Among them are Mexico, the United Arab Emirates, Argentina, Peru, Morocco, and Brazil. All of them will also be on the priority list. U.S.-based China Affairs analyst Li Lingyi says China doesn't have the capacity to produce such a large supply, adding that Beijing's promises are merely an effort to unite countries against the United States and other Western countries. Vaccine development is a science and must follow a standard development process for approval. Dr. Sean Lin, a former U.S. Army virology researcher, expressed his concerns to the Epoch Times. He said it's troublesome when Beijing mentions strategic needs because it means Beijing takes political factors as the priority.
A human rights lawyer who had to flee China spoke at the Republican National Convention last night. He says the Chinese Communist Party beat and imprisoned him after he spoke out against their one-child policy. He's calling on the U.S. to gather a coalition of other democracies to stop the CCP's aggression. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Standing up to tyranny is not easy, I know.
Chen Guangcheng knows the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party firsthand. He is a human rights lawyer and activist. In 2006, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison and later house arrest after filing a class action lawsuit against local authorities for excessive enforcement of the one-child policy.
When I spoke out against China's one-child policy and other injustices, I was prosecuted, beaten, sent to prison, and put under house arrest by the Chinese Communist Party.
Beijing instituted the one-child policy in 1979. Families that didn't comply were subjected to heavy fines, forced abortions, and sterilization. China's communist regime has persecuted millions of people of faith, including Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and Falun Gong practitioners, tens of thousands of whom have been thrown into prison brainwashing centers and forced labor camps.
The CCP is an enemy of humanity. It is terrorizing its own people, and it is threatening the well-being of the world.
Chen went on to say that expressing beliefs on religion, democracy, and human rights that the CCP doesn't approve of can lead to prison. In an exclusive interview with NTD, he said many Chinese citizens are in prison right now for criticizing the CCP on social media sites like Weibo. He said we should stand behind people who have taken action to confront the Chinese regime.
Standing up to fight unfairness isn't easy, I know. So there's President Trump, but he has shown the courage to wage that fight. We need to support, vote, and fight for President Trump for the sake of the world.
In 2012, Chen escaped house arrest and took refuge at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. He said he is grateful to the U.S. for welcoming him and his family to this country where they are now free. He said President Trump has been a leader in standing up to the Chinese Communist regime and that we need other countries to join the fight. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The Chinese embassy in Hungary sent a letter to a member of parliament pressuring her to stop supporting a persecuted group in China. NTD's Germany correspondent Christian Watchen has the story.
A Hungarian member of parliament just had what she called the most absurd moment of her political career. Bernadette Zell received a letter from the Chinese embassy in Budapest on August 19th. In it, the embassy said it deplored and strongly opposed her signing a joint statement in support of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice that's brutally persecuted in China.
It is very unusual for a sovereign member of parliament elected by the Hungarian people to receive a letter from the embassy of another country in which she is told how to behave and what she is allowed to sign and what not.
Zell posted the letter from the embassy on her Facebook page. She said something like this has never happened to her in her almost 10 years in parliament. The statement that she signed in support of Falun Gong was also signed by over 600 lawmakers worldwide. It called for an end to the systematic and brutal campaign to eradicate the spiritual discipline of Falun Gong in China. Over 30 U.S. lawmakers also penned individual letters of support. Falun Gong practitioners have been illegally detained, tortured, and used for slave labor for over 20 years. And according to a ruling by the Independent China Tribunal, many adherents in China have been and continue to be victims of forced organ harvesting. Zell, who was previously nominated as a candidate for prime minister by Hungary's Green Party and now an independent, has been vocal about supporting religious freedom in China. In January, she received a letter from the Dalai Lama, thanking her for her support for the Tibetan people.
We in Europe and also in many other democratic countries of the world believe in religious freedom and that people should not be imprisoned and persecuted for reasons of conscience.
Hungary has strong economic ties with Beijing, including a planned controversial railway project which is part of the CCP's Belt and Road Initiative. Lawmakers in Europe are concerned Beijing's influence has pressured Hungary into complying with Beijing's political agenda in Europe and complicating a unified European position toward Beijing. A report on China's influence in Europe cites a 2016 speech by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. He endorsed Beijing's position that rejects universal values and human rights, claiming that each country needs its own unique system. This week, the Hungarian foreign minister traveled to China, the first foreign minister after the lockdowns to do so. Zell will meet with the Hungarian foreign minister next week to discuss the letter from the embassy and how to respond to it. Reporting by Christian Watson, NTD News, Berlin.
Still to come, Walmart says it's joining the bid to buy TikTok. Microsoft and Walmart will together try to secure a deal to buy the app's U.S. operations. And over half of San Francisco's storefront businesses are closed down. We spoke to a small business owner earlier today. He said he's lost 95% of his revenue because of the lockdown. More on that when we return. Walmart says it's joining Microsoft in a bid to buy mobile app TikTok. Walmart is attracted by TikTok's integration of e-commerce and advertising in other markets. The retail giant wants to bring those capabilities into the app's U.S. operations. The deal would also help Walmart grow its online marketplace and its advertising business. Shares of Walmart rose about 6%. TikTok's parent company is trying to sell U.S. operations of the app after President Trump's executive order effectively bans its use in the U.S. Legislators have deemed the app a national security threat. TikTok and its Chinese parent company sued the U.S. government in retaliation. Walmart's push comes on the same day TikTok CEO Kevin Mayer announced his resignation. And the number of new unemployment claims exceeded 1 million again last week. It's another gut punch for the jobs market as the economy struggles to recover.
Weekly unemployment claims hit a peak of nearly 7 million several months ago. It finally fell below the 1 million mark 3 weeks back for the first time since March. This fueled hopes that the labor market recovery would continue. But with weekly unemployment filings now stuck at around 1 million, concern is growing that the V-shaped recovery may flatten or dip down again. New CCP virus infections have broadly subsided after a resurgence through the summer, but some hotspots remain. Economists and Federal Reserve officials have repeatedly warned that the path to recovery would largely depend on whether the virus continues to pose a threat to public health. And with government stimulus tapering off and talks stalled on another relief bill, signs are growing that the economy's recovery from the pandemic is slowing.
The first department store ever established in the U.S. is closing its doors for good. Lord & Taylor announced Thursday it will have to shut down all 38 remaining stores. The high-end retailer was in business for 194 years. Lord & Taylor filed for bankruptcy on August 2nd. The company originally planned to leave some locations open, but the retailer said it was a better financial decision to close all of them. The liquidator for the company said customers can expect deep discounts on merchandise both in stores and online. And Lord & Taylor isn't alone. San Francisco's Chamber of Commerce says over half of the city's storefront businesses have closed down. We spoke to a devastated gym owner who's still fighting for his livelihood. Indoor gyms and salons are still closed there. Here's Dave Karaker, owner at MX3 Fitness.
We got 5% of our revenue back, but we were down 95% with them. So that's not a solution. We need a solution from the city immediately, or you're just going to see a complete avalanche of closures of businesses in San Francisco. These are these small neighborhood businesses that create the fabric of local neighborhoods. And once they're gone, there's no one that's going to come back and fill those storefronts. There's no business waiting to jump into those empty storefronts. And all of them have zero idea when they're going to reopen. And once they are told they can reopen, we don't have any idea of what we need to do to reopen because the city hasn't provided us with any reopening plans. You take what you're seeing in New York and multiply it by 100 in terms of the boarded up storefronts it looks like a ghost town. It looks like a weird zombie ghost town. We are not far behind what New York did, which was to sue the state. And legal action is not out of the question, because at this point, we're at a level of desperation where it's do something drastic.
Ford is teaming up with real estate developer Bedrock and global tech supplier Bosch to help make parking easier. They're creating an automated valet parking garage demo in Detroit. They'll be using Ford Escape test vehicles that can drive and park themselves, which they'll do in a parking garage owned by Bedrock. The project will use smart technology from Bosch. Drivers will leave their car in a designated area. They'll use a smartphone app to automatically park their car. The app will also be used when the driver wants the vehicle returned to them at the designated pickup area. This project is running for tenants of the Bedrock building and private demonstrations through the end of September. And up next, NATO Secretary General is calling on Belarusian President Lukashenko to respect people's fundamental rights, while Russian President Putin supports President Lukashenko and could send police to Belarus. And a major French industrial and telecom group is replacing 3,000 Huawei-made mobile antennas in France by 2028. France has decided to remove equipment made by Huawei from highly populated areas. More on these after the break. Over to Europe. The presidential election in Belarus has triggered unprecedented mass demonstrations with tens of thousands of people protesting against the election results. But Russian President Putin says he could send police to Belarus if President Lukashenko requests. NTD's UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to our UK newsroom with UK and European news. NATO Secretary General is calling on Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko to respect fundamental rights.
Jens Stoltenberg says NATO is closely watching the developments in Belarus as the crisis unfolds on members' borders.
The regime in Minsk must demonstrate full respect for fundamental rights, including freedom of speech and the right for peaceful protest.
President Lukashenko accused NATO of positioning its forces by the country's western border. Stoltenberg rejects the claim.
NATO has no military buildup in the region, so any attempt to use that as an excuse to crack down on peaceful protesters is absolutely unjustified.
There have been widespread protests since President Alexander Lukashenko, known as Europe's last dictator, declared a landslide victory for his sixth term in office on August 9th. The exiled opposition leader is calling for European Union support, while Lukashenko has asked for Russia's help.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said the Kremlin has set up a reserve police force to support Lukashenko, but it will not be used unless the unrest there gets out of control. And French industrial and telecom group Bouygues is replacing 3,000 Huawei-made mobile antennas in France by 2028. It follows France's decision to remove equipment made by the Chinese company from highly populated areas. Bouygues Deputy CEO Olivier Roussat said the gradual dismantling will have a limited impact on operations. Huawei has close ties to the Chinese military, and the United States has been warning allies that Huawei equipment can be used for spying. Huawei denies the allegation. An increasing number of Western countries have been placing restrictions on the company. In the UK, in the wake of multiple scandals that rock British gymnastics, a new cross-sport integrity forum is being established in Britain. In July, UK gymnastics was engulfed in allegations of physical, emotional and mental abuse at the hands of coaches. The UK anti-doping agency commissioned a study to find if issues of integrity, such as match fixing, corruption, misconduct or doping, are linked. The study came up with 24 recommendations, including creating the forum. The government-backed body will bring together organisations from across the sports sector. The forum meets for the first time next month. And Britain's Home Secretary is warning people not to take part in unlicensed gatherings or face a heavy fine.
Priti Patel said police are fully prepared to fine organisers up to $13,000 for illegal gatherings of more than 30 people. Attendees will be fined around $130 for a first offence. The fine doubles for each additional offence.
They will not hold back because these raves, these parties are damaging.
Despite large social gatherings being prohibited, about 200 people packed into this illegal rave in Manchester. The property owner and party organiser said she only invited 20 friends, but over 100 people showed up, leaving her house trashed.
These are dangerous places. People should not be going along to them. And that is why the police are absolutely clear that they are going to be enforcing these fines and absolutely shutting down these illegal parties and raves.
Authorities are bracing for large gatherings to pop up during the coming public holiday weekend.
A valuable painting has been stolen from a Dutch museum for the third time. Thieves broke in through the back door around 3:30 a.m. and took off with a painting titled Two Laughing Boys with a Mug of Beer. Painted around 1626 by Dutch artist Frans Hals, is valued at around $18 million. Two Laughing Boys was stolen twice before, including in May 2011 from the same museum, and previously in 1988. In the painting, one of the boys looks into the mug. In Dutch, someone looking into a mug refers to a glutton. To Spain, Barcelona's City Council votes to strip former Spanish King Juan Carlos of all official awards he received from the city. Juan Carlos left Spain for the United Arab Emirates at the beginning of this month after allegations of corruption. His sudden exit and the 2-week silence on his whereabouts reignited a debate about the role of the monarchy in Spain. Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia, where a powerful separatist movement has been campaigning for years to establish a republic independent of Spain. The vote was carried by separatist parties on the council. The ex-king has not commented on the allegations, and no formal investigations have been opened. That's all from us for now. Back to New York.
Thanks, Neil. And up next, France is seeing a new surge in CCP virus cases. The government is taking action to fight the spread. And zookeepers at the London Zoo are keen to find out what effect the lockdown had on the animals as they conduct their annual all-zoo weigh-in. Find out more when we return. France is currently seeing a new surge in CCP virus cases. The reproduction number stands at 1.4, which may lead to exponential growth. Now the government is taking action to fight the spread.
France is set to tighten measures across the country to curb the spread of the virus. Mask wearing will be mandatory across the country's capital, Paris. The decision to extend the order citywide was taken by the government. It is not yet clear when it will take effect. The Prime Minister of France warned that the outbreak could spiral out of control if swift action is not taken. He also advised that grandparents shouldn't pick up kids from school.
Let's avoid the situation whereby grandpa and grandma go and get children from school, even if it means having to reinforce after-school measures until parents are able to come and get their children on their own.
The R number of infections in France has risen to 1.4. That means that every 10 people with the virus will infect another 14. An R number above 1 can lead to exponential growth. When asked if the government is going too far with the measures, a resident said that he isn't sure.
I don't know. I'm saying to myself, we have to trust, and I am no expert in this matter. Measures have been taken, but are we going too far or not?
France reported about 5,500 new daily infections on Wednesday. That's a new post-lockdown high and a level not seen since the height of the epidemic in early April.
The London Zoo is one of many places that had to close down due to the virus. Now open again, they're having their annual weigh-in where they can see how the animals coped with the lockdown blues.
The London Zoo began its annual weigh-in on Thursday. Zookeepers are keen to find out what effect the closure had on the animals. It was the longest period of time that the zoo was closed since World War II. In order to bring a turtle to the scale, it had to be led with a yellow hut and some motivational snacks. For the little squirrel monkeys, the zoo needed a much smaller scale than for their other animals. One camel weighed over 770 kilograms, or 1,700 pounds. The annual weighing of the zoo's animals is a major part of caring for the animals.
So by knowing their weights, we can make sure that we give the animals the right medication if they become unwell, or we can also track different life stages, so we can make sure an animal's growing as it should be normally, make sure it's developing properly.
As with many businesses around the globe, the zoo's finances have been ravaged by the pandemic. The zoo had to be closed until June, but its annual weigh-in has given them the opportunity to see how its more than 19,000 animals have been faring. Scale time also means progress in pregnancy can be tracked. Zookeepers can see how the littlest are faring.
Good example is our female okapi. She normally comes in around 250 kilos. We know that her weight today is about 288 kilos, and that helps us tell us that her pregnancy is developing and she's coming into the latter stage of her pregnancy, which is really important.
Staff noticed that some species succumb to the lockdown blues. They said some of the animals noticeably missed the daily influx of visitors. They appear disappointed when no one arrived after the normal 10 a.m. opening time.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.